Webcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and welcome to the ISCA ICAN webinar series. Today we have our third installment of our ASCA Model Series. Today we're talking data, and we have Candy Reed with us. She's going to lead our discussion. Before I turn it over, just want to let everyone know we're going to keep everyone on mute. And if you have questions, please type them into the question section, and Candy will answer them at the end of the presentation. Thank you for joining us, and Candy, it is all yours.
Thank you. Good morning. I hope I'm going to give you a lot of great ideas about where you will find data and how you can collect it, and also be ready to ramp. So what does that word data mean to you? Do you associate it with something exciting? Is it something insightful? How about frightening? Maybe you like data, it's kind of playful, or it's frustrating. So it's really important to collect data in our counseling programs. It really does give you program credibility, and in the way that the schools are functioning now with so much data, you will be part of a really important team in your building. I'm sure most of you are there already. So in this webinar, you will be given real-life examples of data that's collected and receive information on how the data was used by other counselors. The information will follow the implementation guide, and artifacts that I have today are just samples. So if you would like more information, I have my email listed here, and feel free to contact me if you have further information that you would like. Big picture, I'm a big picture person, and so I start with that kind of end in mind. So as counselors, it's important to contribute to the improvement of students' academic achievement. We are part of that work in the schools, and data can prove the value of how counselors assist students in the school and life success. Our big initiative as counselors is to show how students are different as a result of the counseling program. Again, that gives you that credibility in your schools. So there'll be lots of different kinds of data collection. I'm not going to be concerned with the numbers that are in the data. I'm concerned with the way it appears and where you can find it. Our ultimate goal is the academic success of your students for their achievement. School profiles are so important to look at and to start with. In preparing for a ramp, it is important to understand the school community through data. As part of that community, counselors contribute to the success of the students. We definitely are part of a team, and I want to emphasize that throughout. All the data collecting is not just done by the counselor, but by many sources in the district. Some examples of data programs that you might look at for that school program: Infinite Campus, district and school websites, Power School, district surveys, AEA resources. Added one too is Tableau. That's a database. Being ramp ready is a matter of attitude, and knowing what data is available is the first step to making that decision to ramp. This is an example of data collecting that was done in our school district, and it looks like a massive amount of numbers, and it really is. I did not put this work together. This is what the school district did, our technology department. What it shows you is that all of these columns can be sorted, and you will be able to look at the schools, the teacher. You would be able to sort by male, female, by what grade level, age level, race, and so on, as you can read across the screen. It is a massive amount of information, but remember, you sort through it. So you choose the topic that you're interested in and focus on that. It does look overwhelming, and it is. It's a lot of information, but it's collected by the district. It's not anything that I had to put together, but I can definitely use it in my program. So if you have a good tech department, make sure you contact them for what they have available. This is something that I did put together. It's another form of data. It's a bar graph. It shows multiple grade levels. And if you look at it, you have to decide, well, what does it tell me? What I had talked about in this when I used it was that we were going to look at 4th grade and seeing that we could move our 4th grade to from the basic and below basic categories into the proficient and advanced. So I set goals based on that. I put an intervention group together, and I'll show you a little bit of what we did with that a little bit later. This is a bar graph. Program goals are to develop a school profile using academic data, look for achievement discrepancies within grade levels, ethnicities, and gender. The counselor focuses on achievement-related data to affect the change. Achievement-related, remember, is the personal, social, attendance, and behavior data. Achievement would be looking into the reading and math and the Iowa assessment scores. All of the goals should be written in SMART goals, and those that are goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, results-focused, and timely. Thus, the acronym SMART. I'll give you some examples of that. An annual agreement is something that you should put together, meeting with the principal every year at the very beginning of the year. And it lays out your program, and it describes what you're going to be focusing on, where you're going to spend your time. We will talk about that time in just a minute. But this part of the annual agreement shows you the goals that are written in a SMART format. And they are, by the end of the 2017-18 school year, there will be a reduction of classroom referrals by 10%. So it's something that is timely, has a time element part of it, and it shows the numbers that you would like to influence. Second one, by the end of the 2017-18 school year, there will be a 5% increase on the strongly agree answer to my peers respect each other on the learning support survey. It's a survey that we gave every year, and so we have multiple years to compare answers, and it is something that we were working on based on discussion we had actually at our AEA Academy. Third one, at the end of the 2017-18 school year, we will maintain 95% attendance yearly average rate. So we were noticing that attendance was struggling. We used to be a 97% school, and now we were finding that we're slowly dropping. So we ended up setting that as a score because we wanted to keep that 95%. How do you determine the percentage of work that's recommended by by ASCA? So I'm going to show you a graph, and that graph is available on the ISCA website. It's very easy to use. So it will display the use of time, helps to determine if the counseling program follows the ASCA recommendations in the annual agreement. Also, you will identify the activity in 15-minute intervals. And this chart can produce a graphic as a visual for the percentages of time that counselor spends on those activities. This use of time tool is available on the ISCA website. So again, this looks kind of overwhelming, and I'm sure you're saying, well, I'm so busy, I don't know how I can do this. It's a matter of relaying what you have done throughout the day by putting a number 1 in the category under which it is that it occurs. So the first category is the school curriculum. This is a little bit earlier or later program, I should say. So if you're going to update it, it would be the school classroom. So the 1 is saying that from 8:30 to 8:45, I was in a classroom. Actually, from 8:30 to 10:30 during that day, I was in classroom. Responsive services are your small groups. So it shows that on that day I had small group from 7:30 until 8:30, and read across the columns throughout. At the bottom, it gives you numbers to look at as far as how much time you were spending, and it shows that I had a 7-hour, 75 minute day. So actually it would be 8 hours and 15 minutes. Now, with this chart, this chart can be used to show a graphic that will appear later at the bottom of this. I just picked this part because I wanted to show you how to put the numbers in. There's a graphic that will show the time in color, and it's something that you could use to talk to your principal about as well. So this should let people know how you spend your time and that you are responsible throughout the day for so many kinds of activities. Remember, the non-guidance activities are things that fit into the 20%, but only 5% of it should be the non-guidance activities. Calendars. This is something that it has to be planful and it takes time to put together, but once you put them together, they're very useful throughout the year. If you're going to ramp, you have to show your calendars and where you spend your time. And that time should match the ASCA numbers of the percentages of the use of your time. It is important to have weekly, monthly, and yearly calendars to track what your work looks like. And I'll show you some of these, and of course you can take the idea and make it yours. It doesn't have to be exactly as I'm showing you. The calendars also help you track the topic of lessons, the groups you held, and any other counseling and non-counseling duties that you complete. Weekly calendars can be put into a table using the table in the databases, and the monthly, yearly calendars are accessible on the web. So the ones we used were just a particular one that I found on the web that I liked to use. So this is an example of a weekly calendar. It shows the activities that I was doing. I put individual in there. I would, for my own purposes, probably put the student's name, but I wanted to keep that confidential, of course. And so this outlines what my activities were for the day. It shows where I had classroom, and when I was really organized, I was able to put in the topic and the activity. So on April 29th at 9:30, I was in classroom working with the topic of emotion management, and we made spiders. It sounds interesting, doesn't it? At 11 o'clock, I did a group, and we were working on friendship issues. At 11:30, I was in the 3rd grade group, and we were working on anger. So I set that all up as detailed as I could, and would review it so that if I set it up the week before, that I was able to make sure that it was accurate when I completed the work. We did something that was called a recess school. You might have noticed that. And that was where students would have been having trouble at recess. And so I would take them in a group and we would have recess school. We would review rules. We would talk about what was supposed to be happening. We would be doing learning for strategies to get along with others, follow directions, and things like that. This monthly calendar is something I put together to use for classroom lessons specifically. It was something that was handed out to the teachers, every teacher that was involved. I also made sure the secretary, the principal, the SAM, which is a student achievement manager, and anyone else who might be looking for me through the day, because they would know that's where I am. And what was the result of this is that it gave that credibility that I needed to be in the classroom. So throughout my time at my last school, I was able to build that rapport, and so they knew that when I was in the classroom that was an important time. So it was rarely interrupted. There were times when that happened because it needed to, but it gives an idea about everybody knows where I am and no one is chasing me. So also one of the things I just wanted to throw in there is I had to work with carrying a walkie, which I wasn't very good about at all. So everyone would have the schedule, and it was I had more access to them as well. or they had more access to me. It really shows that I'm in charge of my work. This is what I'm going to be doing, and it is they are my priorities throughout the week. This is a yearly calendar, and our group of counselors would meet together at the beginning of the year, and we would set dates and times of things that we really wanted to make sure we did. For example, we had monthly counselor meetings, so those times were written every month. We attended Counselor Academy at the AEA, and so those times were included as well. We worked on particular topics, and usually as a whole group, we were not able to follow exactly the same schedule, but we had something in place to start with. So we worked on, our whole district had second step lessons, so we could identify that all together as counselors, and we did assemblies and things like that where we were dealing with whole school issues. And this calendar, again, is one that we just found on the internet and plugged in the dates and times and shared it. So we all had a copy of that, as well as our administrators. If you want more information on that, you could check out page 102 on the implementation guide, and it will give you some more information about that as well. Keyword is plan, so action plans is my next topic. Plan what your intervention will be to improve the achievement of the discrepant group, and we'll go through a couple of examples of what that looked like. Data should be identified and interventions should be planned to improve that discrepancy, and the plan should show results or lack of results once it is implemented. Why would you want to show the lack of results? You would want to say, well, this probably didn't work very well, and ask those questions about, well, what can I do to make it better? So I'm going to give you some examples of what the data might look like. There's, you'll see some graphs, an Excel spreadsheet, some of the ASCA forms. So look at various places for display of data. There is one, for example, in our school district, that was a huge rubric, and it showed how the schools, all the schools in the district, moved from red to yellow to green, and it was based about with their reading and math achievement scores. So in my RAMP application, I focused on that because it showed the results of what we were doing at our school. So again, go back to your district, see what they have, what did they display, what did they use as public information, and you can tie that into setting your goals for RAMP. Okay, this was a big activity that we have worked on for a couple of years, actually. Our social emotional plan. In our AEA Academy, we talked about the increase of suicides that were happening around the various school districts. And so we talked about how could elementary counselors have an effect upon that, or at least try to. We used the learning support survey that was created by our AEA. So our AEAs were very helpful, so look to your AEAs for help as well. The plan was designed about focusing on lessons from focus groups. So as counselors, we ran focus groups with, in my case, 4th and 5th graders. We identified the concerns that were happening between the students that played into that social emotional piece. And we collected pre and post data, perception and that kind of thing from our learning support survey. We also studied behavior data because we believe if students are comfortable at school and they feel respected, then they will get along better with others and hopefully improve their achievement as well. So this lays out that plan. The action plan was to look at respecting self and others, and we wanted into all of the guidance areas of the classroom lessons. We worked on the mindsets and behaviors, and we chose those that we thought were going to be important. We wanted to look at some behavior and make sure that we're looking at behavior data. So our curriculum materials were that we generated lessons, which we all shared. And again, we didn't all necessarily do the same thing, but we did have a source to rely on. This was in the second semester of the year, and we were hoping that it would affect all K through 5 students eventually. We were going to use a pre-post, have written artifacts, so we outlined then what the perception data collecting would be. Our outcome would be the behavior data, how did it improve or not improve, and then the school counselor was the person that was in charge of that. Again, this is something that was set up by the AEA. It was all done by them, and they would share this information with us once we had completed the survey with our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students. It's just another way to look at the data, and it gives you a trend line of numbers so that you can look at how it has changed throughout the years, that you can look at details about things like, at school I'm worried or afraid about being bullied, almost never, once in a while, so it breaks it down into what the students believe is happening to them. This is only a sample. This document is actually quite lengthy. The students take it in about 20 minutes or so, and it's all done on the computer. Again, all generated from the AEA. So what we needed to do then was to look at how we could use this information to improve behavior and improve the attitude of kids, I guess before we improve the behavior, so that they're respectful to each other. So we pulled out that element of it, and that's how we set up our action plan. Okay, this is an example of a pre-post test. So this would be something we would put in place when we were doing the lessons about the respect that students were feeling or were not feeling. And we'd give this at the beginning of the lessons and then give it at the end. So this is all perception data. It is not achievement data. It is achievement related. So have those terms in mind as you work through looking at the data. I'll add that the process, of course, is the number of students. So this document just shows you perception data that was looked at as pre-post. There are other ways to collect perception data as well. This is a quick way to do that once you're in to the classroom doing your lessons. So know these terms well, that you have perception data, which is how students feel. You have achievement data, which is about the academics, and then you have achievement related, which is most of our work as counselors on the attendance, the behavior, and the mental health, emotional, social state of our students. Okay, I have a closing the gap activity that can show you another way to collect the data. This was actually done as a closing the gap group. We had the students who were having high percentage of negative answers on this survey. They were also students who had behavior referrals, and they had lessons about drum playing. So it was something that we did with the music teacher based on the curriculum from Michael Caine, I believe. And Drum for Peace was the topic. And so the students met and we talked about their behavior. We talked about working together as a group. Once they started working together in the drumming they began to be cohesive, and we were finding a difference in their attitude and in their referrals, and also in their scores. And I'll share that with you next. But this particular document I want to show you is something that all you would have to do is to plug in your scores, plug in your pre-score, you plug in the total number of points, then that will give you a percentage of how the students answered the question. Then you put in your post score, and it will automatically, and the total raw score of this, the follow-up, and then it gives you a percentage of change. And so it shows the difference in the pre and post scores. It's a formula, it's already put in there. You don't have to do anything to it except input your process numbers from the answers to your questions. It's very handy, and it shows the David effect. So if you're familiar with Trish Hatch's work, you'll understand what the David effect is. It shows a percentage of change in the answers. So you can see if your lessons are hitting the points that you think are important. For example, if I look at this, we see there is a negative change in question 8. I'm sorry, I don't know what that question is, but I would have to go back to question 8 and to look at, well, did I teach it okay? Is it something we don't need to know? Is it relevant? That kind of thing. And so it gives me information about how to change my lessons. So everything is calculated for you. This could be done with one lesson, or it could be done with multiple lessons. This is the results report from that particular activity with the pre-post of the drums. It is actually showing, we did 2 months of activities, and it's the result report for closing the gap activities. The achievement scores, as they are noted, are 71% of the students improved their scores on their Iowa assessment. So I feel like this was a successful intervention for our kids. And this results report shows that the students that were put into the group, or invited to the group, I should say, that they reduced, the goal was to reduce referrals by 10% when compared to the year before. The targeted group was 5th grade students who received 5 referrals, and also that they were non-proficient in reading. And usually that goes hand in hand. So when you read across, I was the counselor responsible. We looked at mindsets and behaviors that applied. We talked about the drum circle. You need drums, which is an expensive endeavor, but the music teacher had them. So we got together and put this together for the students. I created a pre-post, which then I have the final results of the pre-post questions listed for you and the percentages that were achieved. And we were looking at referrals. Our goal was to have 10% reduction. We had 25% reduction. There were 71% of our members were proficient on the reading and the Iowa assessment. Now, did I teach them reading? Maybe. We did a little practice of reading the surveys and reading the information about drumming, but I did not teach them the reading. That was the teacher's job. So together, as part of the team, the counselor contributed to the achievement scores for the students and their Iowa assessment, which is what they were working on in their classrooms, of course. I believe also the members of this group were members of our low SES population as well. Major focus was the referrals. But this is the document that shows what you did and what the results were. And because it addresses the achievement scores, it's a results report. All right, another way to look at achievement or scores is to use a graphic such as this. And so if you look at this, it's looking at our kindergartners. They were scored by the DIBELS, which is a reading assessment, in the fall and in the spring. And when the students started, obviously you can see that 51% of the students were in the red, and 49% of the students were in the green. In the spring, 6% of the students were in the red, and 94% of the students were in the green. And you might say, well, that is a result of the teaching by the teachers, which absolutely it totally is. But my part in it as a counselor's role was to talk to the students, work with the students in small groups that had not been to preschool. Most of our kids, we were finding, were coming in with preschool background, and they were ready to have those reading things that they needed to get started, but we still had students who were not in preschool. And so that was the one indicator that drove me to work with them, is they did not have preschool, and they have the low DIBEL scores as well, and they were having some behavior referrals or concerns. So we put some interventions in place in small group, and you can see the final results. Now, again, I'm part of the team. The academic team, the teachers are working with the students. My contribution was a small group, and we worked on following directions and all of the things the teachers were working on in the classroom. Plus, we worked on working together as a group, because many of the students didn't have that experience. So we would do activities where they had to share things. We might put a puzzle together or help each other answer some questions, things like that. But in this graphic, it's evident in using the red and the green that there was a great improvement in their proficiency in the DIBELS assessment by the end of the school year. And again, I could say the counselor contributed because I worked with kindergarten students in a small group who needed that extra boost, working on mostly perception type things. So this is a little bit about how I documented what I did with the group. The topics or the work we did are listed under the artifacts, and I used a specific curriculum for this, and we had the number of attempted artifacts and the number completed. We did not evaluate how well they were done, we just evaluated that they were completed. One of the students moved. That was something to note because that would affect some of those scores. And we had 15 of the 17 students were on green. So in that sense, I felt as though the counselor, through the small group, helped the children become efficient on their achievement. And again, this is process data, but it is that helps keep the plan moving and know what they did as far as while they participated in the group. This is another way to display data. Our friend Trish Hatch, when she would come to visit with us, had talked about using PowerPoints as far as a way to share information. And so this is just one I would like to show you. This is the one that was based on the 4th grade scores. And you start by showing the standards. In this case, it was a little bit earlier language than what we have right now. We would have mindsets and behaviors there now. I set up an action plan and shows what that is, some of the things that we did. And so some of the pre-post things that we were talking about where students can identify stray marks. We were talking at that time about how to use the scoring sheets for Iowa assessments, that they need to listen to the directions of the test. And at the beginning, they felt they couldn't do that. A lot of them, at the end, all of them thought they could. Students report confidence in taking it. That's that perception data. How do you feel about that? So we just created this graphic to display the results of the pre-post. And so you can see that their units scores improved as they walked through their reading assessments. And so we were focused on reading assessments as we were meeting in our group. So that would be something I would show the staff and say, this is what we had worked on. Okay, now I have to figure out how do I get back to okay, I'm having trouble getting back to where I was. Let's see. I'm having trouble here. I'm calling in my technician here to help me out. The end of it. Wait. There we go. Okay, I got it. Thank you. Sorry for that. I apologize. This is something else that we did through, we started an intervention room in our school, and we were looking for the data for behavior. And I started with PowerPoint slides, and the numbers got all jumbled up, and it was really difficult to read. So I ended up revamping it using the same numbers, but PowerPoint is awesome to use when we share this information. This is something I shared with the staff. So it was based on research, which is important to indicate when you're talking data. We're not just making things up, we're finding them somewhere. And this comes from Dimmitt and Carey, which you'll find a lot of their information in the books that we're working from that were the implementation guide and so on. So this is a cylinder, it's called. It's just the way to display the quarters of behavior in the different years. So as I said, I was having trouble with collecting so many numbers and making it look like something that we could actually read easily. So we divided up the types of referrals, and we collected them by quarter. And of course, we looked at how they would compare from first quarter to fourth quarter, and also year by year. So there's a lot of slides that we put together. This is about physical fighting. And then we did fancy things like make the things move. And at one time I used, sounds and things like that. So this PowerPoint is an awesome way to show your data collecting and share it with the staff members and anyone else that would like to see it. We set up our intervention room, and we called it the green room because it was referring to, when you go to a green room, like at a theater, you're waiting to go on. Green was that calming color that was supposed to be helping the students calm down, so the whole room was painted green. So that's what that means when you see referrals to the green room. It was our intervention room. We used some exercise activity like a treadmill and things like that, where the kids could come in and get their energy out. Also, some computer programs would help them calm themselves. We wanted to change the intervention room from something that was seen as discipline to reward. So students would earn rewards once they started having improved behavior. And you can see the rewards kind of just went crazy at the end of the school year. All of a sudden, everybody wanted to be good. It was awesome. So this is just another way to display that data. And then we talked about this information, shared it with the staff. We were worried about discussing mental health of students. And so we used this as a learning tool to talk to the teachers about how to talk to students, to change some of their wording from things like what's wrong with you to what's happened to you, what's going on. We talked about what might be influencing the behavior. So we just did some bullets and went through some of these things about this information, which I'm sure all of you know and can share with your staff. And we also wanted to recognize what was in place. What do we have in place that's working well for our students? Or at least what are we trying? If it's not working, then what else can we do? These are things that we as a group had decided to add, and I mean that group of teachers and my counselor advisory group. So talking about how you take care of yourself and so on. But using the PowerPoint is so, I mean, I'm sure you see them a lot in your schools, but this is how we used it for our counselor academics. This particular display, I really loved using. It puts a lot of data together in one location. So when we talked about the formulas earlier, this was also something that was done here for all of the behaviors that we were tracking. And so if you put in all of the data, you insert the data of how many referrals happen per quarter, then at the end there's a calculated percentage, all put in by a formula. All you have to do is put your numbers in, and the numbers are calculated for you. So this shows the behavior referrals. This shows a lesson that we did, or set of lessons we did in third grade in empathy. It also shows the average daily attendance, and that is not a calculation. That was just input of the numbers. At the bottom, you'll see some more data where you can put in intentional guidance. We were looking, intentional groups. So we were looking at the absences and tardies for students. We were also looking at behaviors. So we could plug in the number of students as it reads across, the number of groups we had, the percentages pre and midpoint and post, and those things automatically calculated at that point. So this document, again, is just in Excel, and this data is entered into the Excel. Okay, I'm really excited to share these next two sections with you. And this is what I call action research by the counselors that I have worked with. And they are right now, this year, hot off the press, working with this attendance research in one of the schools, and then I'll show you a behavior one in another school. So I'm really excited to share these, and I appreciate that the counselors were willing to share their information with me. Now, we're looking at, okay, I'm getting ready to do a ramp. So what do I do? You see so many databases, you know so many things that are available to you, know what it can look like. Now you have to decide, what do I want to focus on and how do I want to do it? So what you're going to see is something that's happened in the last couple of months at school, and it will leave you with some questions, but hopefully it'll give you some ideas as well. So the first action research that's going on is in a school in the district that's the second lowest attendance rate in the district. They're low achieving academically. The district is working with the school. So again, this is not something that just the counselor is doing. It is part of a whole huge program. The district agreed to a later start time for the school because the school started at 7:20, which is quite early for little kids, and the kids were having trouble getting to school. So the district said, because this school was in a walk zone, they didn't have buses really, that they could start a little bit later. The district then found some financing for a late bus that would go to pick up kids who were not at school on time. The counselor's work was to work with the SAM, Student Achievement Manager, to collect the data and implement the interventions, I believe. So they worked in small group. The counselor worked in small group and individual settings with students who had continued absences and tardies. Okay, now, I hope this is going to work and show you. Okay, so this, again, looks overwhelming, but actually it would be totally awesome if this school decided to ramp, because it's so important that in a ramp, you're going to collect your data, you're going to work really hard and decide what data you would like to show in the ramp. You also need to write that narrative, and the narrative needs to be detailed. And this is a perfect example of what you would draw from to write that narrative. The narrative is to look at the data You have to identify, why did you choose that topic? Why did you choose the data? What data were you looking for? How did you put in interventions? And then what are the results? In this case, if you look at this document where the yellow lines are, where they're finding the biggest change right now is that there are less tardies. Students are coming to school on time more often in every grade level. So this gives you a whole set of numbers per grade level. And again, the counselor didn't do all this by himself. He worked with the student achievement manager in the building, or you could work with an administrator, or it's just maybe another counselor or something, someone like that. But this is outlined in so much detail. I wanted to share it with you. And again, the numbers are showing that the tardies are working, they're working hard to improve that or to reduce tardies. There's even this research that they included about the weather, because if you're a walk school and the kids are walking to school, the weather might certainly have an influence over what's going on and why the kids are late. So they studied the data of the weather to see if that might play a part in whether or not students are coming to school on time. So as you can see, every grade level had improvements. And these are bulleted highlights, and they include every grade level. And again, they're working from first quarter to second quarter of this school year. So I really appreciate the counselor sharing that. Have a second example. Here we go. So the second example is of behavior. This was from my counselor guru friend, Lisa Lampe, and she allowed me to share this information with you. She is in a school that has PBIS, Voice Town, and skills groups in place. All the staff is involved in improving behavior. So they do their tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 involvement of all the teachers in behavior. There is a student intervention team, a SIT team, that meets weekly to review the data on behavior. And Lisa is part of that as the counselor. And it involves other people that can influence the behavior of the children. Once the student receives a referral, the counselor invites the student to be part of the intervention group the next week. They meet for 15 minutes a day, Monday through Thursday, and the numbers are all monitored through the Tableau database. And she has allowed me to show you the numbers of what has happened this year compared to last year. And you will see that if you look at September, there were 42 referrals this year. There were 44 referrals last year. But that gave, some time to identify which students would need the assistance, which ones would be able to be in maybe just 1 week and released. What she would use as interventions in her group to help address the attendance issues, with the behavior issues, with the students. And you can see from September to October, a dramatic drop in behavior referrals. And especially when you do compare it to last year, there was a drop of 20 referrals for the month of October. In November, there was a drop there were 26 referrals this year when compared to 57 referrals that occurred last year. So those are dramatic numbers and changes in their behavior. If you look at December had 32 referrals this year, 39 last year. So within that, within the numbers that are collected here, you can see that they a little bit more of the increase. And then looking at January, they almost were identical. So now what do you do with that data? So now Lisa's talked about, well, first of all, she might look at her groups. Does she change some of the things that she's using. She's decided that there's some curriculum that might work a little bit better. Is it influenced by new students? Maybe there's a new student that has come in and came in and shows a lot of behavior problems. So the whole idea is you need to dig deeper as you look into these numbers, and you not just report them, but actually look at what is happening for them. Overall, there's a 10% decrease in referrals from this year to when compared to last year. And you can see where the influence started early on in the year, and hopefully that will continue. Maybe there needs to be more interventions going on by other people. And maybe it's some students, like you might have one student that's getting 15 referrals, where you have fewer students you're working with, which is another way to look at the data. So we talked about how she can dig deeper, hopefully being able to improve those interventions and or find them that might work better for her. Also, when you think too about behavior of students, what happens in January? They don't get to go out for recess, and these are little kids. So that might be an influence as well. They're inside the classroom and probably enjoying their recess, but it's not the same thing as going out and having that physical activity. Maybe there are some classroom dynamics that have changed or something like that they need to look at as well. And that would be part of the SIT team. So Lisa would bring her numbers to the SIT team, the student intervention team, and they would work together to see what could be done to keep that momentum going of what they saw early on in the school year. This is Tableau. That's the database that we're looking at, and it's awesome because it points out all of this information from what day of the week do most referrals occur. 57 referrals happen at Thursday, and if you look at the year before, Thursday was the big day as well. So then you can also look at the time of the day. So what's going on at 11 o'clock here and 12 o'clock from last year is that might be their lunch recess time where they might see the most referrals. If you look here though, it looks like last year or this year, most of the referrals are coming out of the classroom, and that was the case also as last year. So remember, this number right here is for the whole school year. This number is for this school year so far. So this is a great database. It's called Tableau, and I believe it is not too expensive to buy, I should say, and it gives you a tremendous amount of data to use. Well, thank you for listening. I hope that I've given you some things that you might be able to use to create your own or to look in your district to find other people that could help you with that. You have to decide if your school is ramp ready, and do that before you actually dive into, starting to write anything. The ramp application is lengthy, and you should look at what's expected in each category, plan it out as we talked about before, and look for what you think might be helpful for you and writing the ramp. Data is super important whether or not you write a ramp, and it keeps the credibility going for why we need our counselors in our school buildings. So if you have, I have about 6 minutes left, so if there are any questions or anything, I can wait for a few more minutes to see. Go ahead and send your question. Or comments, a comment would be fine. I put down these resources here, and I totally appreciated the Davenport Community Schools for allowing us to look at their databases. I used the ASCA national model, of course, the framework, and the implementation guide. The implementation guide is awesome. Also, that would help lead you toward making that decision about RAM. And of course, we started working with Trish Hatch in, I believe, 2006. And she was the greatest impetus for change for our school district as far as the counseling program. She is the one that called the counselors together with the administrators and really got us going on the data. We weren't necessarily happy at the time, but I've learned to love it. So it really has been awesome.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you to Candy for participating today and for taking the time to put this together. I know data is incredibly important, but not one of those topics that everyone feels comfortable with right away. So thank you so much for taking the time to go through all of this and be part of our ASCA Model Series. The webinar has been recorded and will be put on the ISCA website by the end of the day. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate being asked.
All right, have a great day.
You too.